The last source of business startup money that we're going to talk about is investors. When you get investment money from someone else, unless that person is also going to participate in the operation or management of the business with you, the chances are that the investment money that they put in, whether it's buying stock or buying memberships in an LLC or investing in a limited liability partnership, limited partnership, no matter how they invest the money, the chances are it is what is called a security. And if it is a security, then it must either be registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission, which is a long and complicated and expensive, very expensive legal process you don't want to do unless you're raising a lot of money. Or you've got to qualify for one of the several exemptions that are basically designed for kind of small startup companies that don't want to spend all that money on SEC registration. You've got to qualify for one of the exemptions, and then you can offer your investment without being required to register with the SEC. So you will see in the printed material on the website a list of the different SEC registration exemptions. You are not required to learn all those different exemptions for this course, but for example, there's one for raising what would be called a relatively small amount of money. If you're only asking for no more than $5 million in investment, you might come under the small offering exemption. There's one for offering your investment only to the residents of one state. That's called an intrastate offering. And there are some exemptions that limit the number of unaccredited investors that you can offer your investment to. So, and I'll get to that in a minute, what that means. But I am not going to require you to know all the SEC exemption, registration exemptions for this overview type course. But there are about 5 things that I am going to require you to know for the test with regard to Securities and Exchange Commission laws and regulations. And the first one is the definition of a security. What constitutes a security? Well, the courts have said that there are 4 things that constitute a security, or there are 4 things that make up what is a security. The first is that a person invests money. The second is that they invest that money in a common business enterprise. The third one is that when they invest it, they have a reasonable expectation of a return of profits. And the fourth one is that those profits are generated by the work of someone else. So they're not participating in the business themselves. They're letting someone else run the business and earn the money, and they just want a return on their investment. So those are the 4 things that constitute a security. And if what you're looking at is a security, then you must register it or you must come under one of the exemptions. And you would be surprised at the kinds of things that sometimes can constitute securities. We think that a security is shares of stock that we offer for sale or memberships in an LLC. But there's one case where there was a orchard farmer, a orange orchard farmer in Florida, and he was strapped for money. And he said, how am I going to get money? He said, there's a lot of people up on the East Coast, up in New York, that have dreamed about being a farmer. I'm going to go up there and I'm going to sell them an ownership interest in 1 row of my orchard of orange trees. And what I'm going to tell them is, you pay me this money and you own the rights to that 1 row of orange trees in my orange orchard. I will do all the watering and the weeding and the fertilizing, and at the end of the season I'll harvest all the oranges and I'll sell them. But all of the profits that come from your 1 row of my orange trees, when I sell the oranges, you'll get the profits. So he sold a bunch of rows of his orange orchard to investors, and the business failed. And those people showed up later unhappy, investors that lost their money, and they said, those investment opportunities that you offered us, buying the rights to rows of your orange grove, those were securities, and you didn't register and you didn't have an exemption from securities registration, so you violated securities law and you owe us back all our money. And the farmer said, you kidding? I wasn't selling shares of stock. I was just selling rows of orange trees. And the judge looked at the case and he said, well, let's put it through the 4-point test. Did they invest money? Yes. Did they invest money in a common business enterprise? Yep, the common business enterprise was the orange orchard. Were they expecting a return of profits? Yes. Were the profits to be generated mostly by the labors of someone else? Yes, the farmer was going to do all the work. So the row of orange trees turned out to be a security, and the farmer was in deep trouble. So I expect you to know that 4-point definition of what a security is. The next thing I expect you to know is that if you ever do decide to offer an investment opportunity of any kind, the first thing you do before you offer your investment opportunity to anybody is go see a lawyer, find out whether or not what you're offering is going to be a security, and if so, what plan you're going to use to qualify for an exemption from SEC registration. Now let me give you an example of what can go wrong if you don't go and see the lawyer before you make your very first offering of an investment opportunity. Suppose, hypothetically, that you and your buddy Sam work in the research and development department of Hewlett-Packard, HP, and while you're there doing research, you come up with a really neat new electronic device that you think will sell like Cracker Jacks. Everybody's going to want one. So you take your product, your new invention, to the people in charge at HP and you pitch it to them and they say, wow, you guys came up with something that's really cool and we think a lot of people will buy it. But unfortunately, it does not fit in well with our product line, so HP's not going to market it. But we'll tell you what we'll do. We will license that product to you guys, you and Sam, and you pay us a little royalty. We'll let you take that device and start your own business, and you sell it under your own business name. And as long as you pay us a little royalty on each one you sell, you guys can get rich manufacturing and selling this product. And you guys go, wow, yeah. So at the office Christmas party for HP, there's 200 or 300 employees there, drinking wine and celebrating. And you guys get up on one of the tables and you say, hey, we just wanted to let you know that with HP's full blessing, we're leaving the company. We got this great new product idea. We're going to be paying HP a little royalty, and we're starting a new business. So we've enjoyed working with you guys, and we'll miss you, but we're starting our own company, and we're going to make a fortune. And by the way, any of you guys want to buy some stock, we're selling stock, and you're going to get rich with us. So you just made an investment offering to 200 or 300 people, most of whom were probably what are called unaccredited investors. And there's a limit. If you're going to do one of the small offering exemptions, and many of those, you're not allowed to offer your investment opportunity to more than 35 unaccredited investors. You just blew your SEC registration exemption and you haven't even started yet. So go see the lawyer first. Find out what your exemption plan is, and then stick by it. For test purposes, there's only 3 other things you need to know. One is, what is the difference between an accredited investor and an unaccredited investor? An accredited investor is one who is financially sophisticated. Maybe he has an MBA, or he's an accountant, or he's a lawyer, or he's just a Wall Street experienced person with a lot of money. But he's sufficiently financially sophisticated that he can look at a prospectus or a balance sheet and he can assess the degree of real risk that's there and decide whether or not he's willing to undertake that degree of risk. An unaccredited investor, on the other hand, is an ordinary Joe like you and I. We look at a balance sheet or a prospectus and we don't know for sure what it is we're looking at. And if we lost a lot of money on the investment, it might ruin us. And so to protect us, many of the SEC registration exemptions say, hey, you can offer your investment opportunity to as many accredited investors as you want because they're financially sophisticated. But you cannot offer it to any more than 35 unaccredited investors. So you need to know the difference between an accredited investor who is financially sophisticated and an unaccredited investor who is not. And you need to know that magic number, which is 35. 35. You cannot offer your investment to more than 35 unaccredited investors under some SEC registration exemptions. Now, the final thing that you need to know for test purposes about securities law is that if you're doing something like an intrastate offering where the stock can only be sold to residents of one state, you're required to have some printed language right on the outside margin of the stock certificate that says something like, the shares of this corporation can only be sold to residents of the state of California. So if you ever buy a small corporation from somebody else through a stock sale, one of the first things you want to do is go physically inspect the stock certificates to see if there are any restrictions on transfer out in the margins of the certificate, and if possible, even go see the lawyer that set up the corporation to make sure that there are no restrictions on transfer. Because if you're from Wisconsin and you buy a corporation that is restricted from being sold to anyone outside the state of California, you buy a company now that has an SEC registration problem. So you don't want to do that. So always check to see if there are any restrictions on the sale of the stock. Okay, that's it for Securities and Exchange information, and we just have, I believe, one last thing to cover before we finish up on where do I get the money.